So the first thing, Sandy Quinn, who works for the library, suggested that he would like to see trains all the way from the floor to the ceiling. And he was flapping his arms around, and it kind of reminded me of the robot in Lost in Space. And I kind of laughed, and I was thinking, well, wait a minute, okay. This reminds me of an idea I had that I'd actually gotten in connection with Disney. I was on the Small World exhibit, and I was in there, and I was just going up that first row where you see dolls and animation, and you see the British Isles represented, Ireland, Scotland. And I remember looking at that thinking, well, that would be kind of neat if it was done as a train exhibition. So I thought, well, maybe someday I'll be in a position to do something where you go from floor to ceiling with trains and kind of do the scale. So as Sandy Quinn was flapping his arms around, I remember thinking, that idea I had at Disneyland, maybe building something from floor to ceiling would fit for this. So I went home that night and kind of laid out a drawing that was the pyramid that we eventually built. And also, we talked about a wall of trains. And in the wall of trains, we would have members from TCA bring in trains, put them on the wall in these displays, and it would give people a chance to realize what toy modeling trains had evolved from, going back to the late 1800s. So we had exhibits there from the late 1800s on through. Another thing Sandy Quinn had said at that meeting was, ironically, he asked me, myself and Wayne, did you know that Walt Disney had a backyard railroad at one time? Of course, I was real heavily involved in Carrollwood at that point, and I kind of chuckled and I said, well, yeah, I know a little bit about it. And he said, well, you know, I was thinking maybe I could approach the Nixon daughters and ask them if they'd contact Diane Disney because they're friends and see if there's any chance we could borrow Walt's train. And I said, well, before you do that, let me try something first. And he said, okay. So I called Michael Brogy and I said, Michael, I said, I've been asked to head up this display at the Richard Nixon Library, and they're wondering if they could possibly get Walt Disney's Lilly Belle engine. I said, what do you think? And he said, well, I'll send an email out to Walt Miller and we'll see what comes back. Well, about 2 days later, Michael sent me an email and said Walt Miller had thought it was a nice idea and he would forward it to Diane and see what would happen. So 3 days later, Diana responded positively, so Michael had basically made arrangements that we could get Walt Disney's Lilly Belle in the full consist and have it shipped down to the Nixon Library as part of this exhibit. So Diane Disney got back to Michael and said that we could have the Lilly Belle engine. But I think having gotten the approval to have the Lilly Belle gave a lot of credibility to the idea. And as they thought about it, Sandy Quinn really liked the idea. Here it was, trains from floor to ceiling. Then with the trains on the wall, we had most of the available wall space covered between the Lilly Belle and that. Now also, too, I proposed that we do something with the monorail. The monorail and Richard Nixon tied directly into Disney, so we could tie Richard Nixon to Walt Disney to trains. Richard Nixon was the guest celebrity, along with his family, for the opening day of the monorail in 1959. So we have pictures and footage of Richard Nixon at this opening ceremony.
To open the first operating monorail system in America, it is our good fortune to have our friend and fellow Californian, the Vice President of the United States, Mr. Richard Nixon, and his charming family, Mrs. Pat Nixon, Julia, and Patricia, his daughters. Mr. Nixon, our Vice President.
Well, thank you very much, Walt.
Managed to get through Bob Gurst's original piece of the monorail, and we made a nice little display honoring that.
Well, we're setting up Walt Disney's backyard train, the Lilly Belle, and her consist here at the Richard Nixon Birthplace and Library for their annual Christmas event. This year, the theme is trains. So we created up the Lilly Belle at the Families Museum and the Presidio. We brought it down here. And we're currently setting up the trestle that Roger Brogy Jr. built. Awesome. And once that's done, then we're going to put the Belle and her consist up. It's going to look fantastic.
Awesome, awesome. and I'm documenting it. And we just unloaded the whole train and built the trestle and put all the cars up on the trestle, and the engine is the last piece that we're doing right now. And there's a big gala event tomorrow night that's going to have the entire, oh, here comes the train. There it is, Lilly Belle. 173, there's about 14 people standing around here right now.
Okay, we might as well take off the end piece.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I was up at Club 33 last night with the Red Handkerchief Society and Wally Bogue and Bob Gurr and the whole gang, and we got to ride in the Lilly Belle train and stayed at Disneyland past midnight and roamed the streets totally